Hi, welcome to this ITQ Conversations video. We again have some guys from Igel over. My name is Maarten Caus. I'm an end-user computing architect at ITQ. I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Hello, thank you Maarten for having us. My name is Jordy Nypels and Enterprise Relationship Manager for the BeNeLux and Nordic region.
Okay, welcome.
Hello Martin, so I'm Ben Ward and I'm a Field Technologist UK and Ireland at Agile.
Okay, thank you very much for coming. So we've talked about Agile previously in another video, but what is really, you mentioned something in an earlier talk about tech debt. What do you mean by that?
It's technical debt is one of the big trends that we're seeing right now. And I think a lot of that is because if you think about what happened in the early stages of the pandemic, when it seems like a long time ago now, doesn't it? But March 2020 or April 2020, we saw a lot of organizations start to panic and try to find a really, really quick way of getting people to work remotely. And so a lot of enterprises out there, what they did is they maybe expanded their VPN licenses. Maybe they bought some new VPN concentrators. Maybe they decided that what they had to do was buy 50 or 100,000 laptops and then deliver them out to end users who are now not working in the office, but working from home. And so what that's done, what we've seen is most organizations trying to move away from legacy technology. But what the pandemic did was it caused people to scale out all of that legacy tech, all of the technical debt that they had. So if they had a laptop estate, maybe using Active Directory and group policies, what they did is they just scaled that out. And
you truly indeed saw two trends at that point in time. Was indeed, let's do what we currently have and let's just expand that widely. Or indeed, some other companies just looked at, okay, let's look at what's the other way and just some brand new strategy. Or SaaS, also the cloud, it just exploded during the pandemic indeed as well, because you mentioned indeed, devices, but and we need a few 100,000 laptops. Yeah, there was a problem because there was immediately a shortage of that as well.
Procuring these devices, and then when it comes to VDI, procuring the servers, getting the servers in place, and then racking them in the data center. In the early days, you couldn't really leave the house, so doing anything like that was very, very difficult. And so yes, you're right, a lot of people went to the cloud because there's no lead time. There's no hardware that you have to buy. But in the early days, again, Azure, Microsoft, they ran out of capacity, at least in the first month or two. So there was a big hold-up. But what we saw was a lot of people trying to scale out that old way of doing things. So we've ended up in a situation now, 2 years on, where a lot of organizations are looking at ways to reduce their technical debt. So that's what we're seeing right now.
Okay, and how are you trying to solve that?
Well, I'll give you a good example. As I said, a lot of customers now have potentially thousands and thousands of maybe Windows 10 laptops out in the field. And they'll have users who are sitting really geographically spread, not coming into the office. So the issue is, how do we actually manage those devices now? Well, group policy, Active Directory, I've never met anyone in IT who likes Active Directory. I don't think it's just me, it's an awful solution. But trying to manage thousands of Windows 10 devices using old technology is quite a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, it's a challenge.
A challenge is being nice, I think. Yeah, exactly. And I think, so you've got that management challenge, but then you've got the security challenge as well. And another piece that I think used to get forgotten, but which is now probably front and center, is sustainability, environmental impact. Because when you buy thousands of laptops, one, you've got the power consumption, but two, you've got the actual environmental impact of manufacturing those devices in the first place. In 2020, 300 million PCs and laptops were made. That's a huge number.
That's indeed a huge amount, yeah.
So what we see now is a lot of organizations are thinking, how can we secure those endpoint devices? How can we manage them better? And then going forward, are we going to do another PC refresh, or are we going to do something completely different? Which is where Igel comes in to help people make the most of the technology they've already bought, but then help to move to the next new strategy.
And how do you see that? Do you then indeed install your own operating system on their older hardware, or how does that happen?
Exactly. You see a lot of old hardware, and with the hardware shortages, they need to use that. And then Agile comes to the desk, and we can provide a solution on old hardware, new hardware, and manage them on the same way. So we really see the extension of the life cycle of these devices. So that's sustainability is all about, and we can help there as Agile.
Okay. I'll give you a really good example as well. So my first face-to-face meeting back in the office was in October last year. So we went in to see a big finance customer. And what they said, and when you think about it, it really makes sense. But what they said was, previously, whenever they were talking to customers or had customers in the office, it was all about voice. It was all about phone calls.
Yeah.
Now, customers are demanding video. They're demanding Zoom, they're demanding Teams, not just internally in the office, but actual customers, external customers. Yeah. We want to see you, we want to talk to you on a video conferencing tool. So previous to the pandemic, Teams and Zoom were very much niche products. Now though, they are critical for every business. Absolutely. So one of the key things that came along, and we've seen this in the past year or so, probably a little bit longer, is a technology that may have been delivered out in the early stages, wasn't powerful enough to run Teams. Teams is a beast. Beast of an application.
You need GPU to be able to run that in a nice way.
At least 16 gigs of RAM potentially. It's a great collaboration tool, but it's very, very hard on the endpoint software. So one of the things that we bought out quite quickly, and we already had this with Zoom, was the ability to integrate these collaboration tools with our solution. So even if you have an older device, what you can do is you can offload the Teams piece, you can offload the Zoom piece, you can offload that to your VDI solution, but make the best use of the hardware that you've got. So from an end user perspective, performance is amazing. But actually, even though the endpoint devices may be a little bit older now, because you're using Igel OS, which is a thin, efficient operating system, from a user perspective, it's a very good experience. So again, that's another way we're eliminating, or at least mitigating, that technical debt.
And indeed, really, if you implement that and then you extend it to indeed one of our solutions, indeed more into in a VDI desktop platform, like you mentioned, indeed, it's a speedy OS, and if we deliver published applications to that, it's like actually more like a laptop instead of investing a huge deal in a big beefy beast, like you call it, with a lot of CPU power and everything like that. You can just have it running in a small box, or even on old hardware, Jordy, like you mentioned, indeed, that we can run it.
And don't forget security. Security is very important.
I just wanted to mention that as well, because indeed, security, it drives every conversation that we have with customer. I can expect it's the same for you guys. Absolutely. But indeed, if we mention security, how do you provide security indeed on that small beefy system? Because you said most of the time, if we implement security, it always has an impact of digital employee experience. So how do you solve that?
It's about implementing security transparently. So this is the key when it comes to anything end user computing. I used to be an IT manager, and I was a very bad one. What I didn't understand was that the goal of IT is to make technology invisible for the end user. And it's the same with security. If your end users notice that they can't do things, they're going to complain, they're not going to have a good experience. So the whole purpose of Igel OS is to remove the visibility of the security that you're doing. So providing access into, let's say, Horizon, potentially, into VMware Horizon, that should be a completely seamless process. It could be as simple as turning the device on, then it gets to your login prompt for Horizon, then you're in. The underlying operating system is so thin and secure, as opposed to something like Windows on the endpoint, that actually what it's doing is just providing you with that endpoint to consume that VDI desktop. So there's much less going on that endpoint compared to using a big monolithic operating system like Windows. So that's a key part of our security strategy.
Yeah, and once again, like you just mentioned, you can indeed incorporate it into a complete flow. So indeed, you use indeed the small operating system, Igel OS, indeed, for having access to another portal. So for delivering great end user experience, once again, from the UD Pocket or whatever, it doesn't matter. You can still have access to indeed to your Horizon platform, your published applications. But even, like you said, if you use what you're holding in your hand,
UD Pocket,
UD Pocket,
it's so small you might not even be able to see it.
Yeah, and if you use that, then you can just indeed plug it in any existing hardware. You can continue to work. So you can still, from a company point of view, you don't have to invest into expensive hardware or complete new laptop renewals and things like that.
Exactly.
Just buy that. And is that also possible to manage that from any place?
The management is exactly the same.
That's completely okay.
So whether or not you're installing it on the device itself, on the hard drive, or booting up from this, from an Agile management perspective, it's exactly the same. So all the configuration policies you can push out to it, which is very, very powerful. And potentially you could plug this into multiple devices and still get the same experience. And one of the other things I just want to call out is there's the cost piece, obviously, when it comes to renewing those endpoint devices. There's also the sustainability piece as well. So there's two different types of cost. There's the financial cost that a lot of enterprises look at. There's also the environmental cost. And making sure that your environmental, your sustainability message is good is now more key than ever. And that's, again, something that we do. So using a device for maybe 8 years rather than 4, it's got massive financial benefits and massive environmental benefits too.
That's indeed where we actually all more or less offer the same service to our customers. What we're trying to do indeed with VMware Technology is indeed consolidate as much as possible on a smaller set of service and still deliver a great experience like indeed VDI or SaaS apps. It doesn't matter, all within Workspace ONE. And that, so we all are contributing to the environmental impact. And it's, I think if you talk to customers, indeed, that's also more and more becoming a driving factor for it's not just only about the electrical bill and things like that, but indeed like
wider. It's a much wider conversation.
Yeah, it's a real wider conversation.
Yeah, well, and I think as well, one of the things that we're seeing is younger generations are now more driven by sustainability than ever before. An interesting stat for you. I don't know if you ever go onto TikTok. Maybe. I don't. Yeah, exactly. But if you have a look at the sustainability hashtag on TikTok, it's had over 815 million views. Okay, so that's more than pretty much everything else in technology. Sustainability is important to the generation who are now coming into universities, into higher education, into the workforce. So this is going to become a much more important topic going forward. And when it comes, my belief is when it comes to environmental impacts, one of the primary ways that IT can reduce the impact is just by using devices for longer. It's a very simple proposition, but it makes a huge difference.
Okay, great. Thanks for the conversation. So actually the key takeaway is indeed, if you want to improve your environmental impact, you can use Agile technologies in combination with the services ITQ can deliver indeed to consolidate as much as possible and that we can all live and hopefully in a better tomorrow. Where can they find more information if they want to know more about tech debt or how to reuse their all-purpose hardware?
Yeah, just reach out to us by email or visit our website or LinkedIn profile. The link is in below. So happy to help you.
Okay, great. Once again, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Maarten.
Thank you for watching again, and we'll see you in the next one.